evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be telling you about the geography and history of Namibia. Very unusually shaped country, isn't it? There's always a reason for that, though. Apparently the symbol Namibia you can make with your hand is holding your hand out and pulling in this finger to make this shape. Very hard to do at my angle, but you get what I'm saying. You can see the strip here, little dent, and your fingers. That's Namibia shape. So let's talk about Namibia. It's a really fascinating country and really gorgeous. Topple's also here. He was still hanging out from the last video I made. The most interesting aspect of Namibia, in my opinion, is its namesake. There's my pencil. The Namib Desert right here. It is a gorgeous desert, especially in this region right here. This area is known as the Skeleton Coast. And I'll show you pictures in this book. We'll flip through this after I go over the history. But the Skeleton Coast is thusly named for a few reasons. One is that it's full of shipwrecks and actual skeletons from people who didn't survive the desert. And it's just a very inhospitable, very dangerous desert. It's not one you want to go wandering around because you might wind up one of the skeletons if you're not careful. It's one of the oldest deserts in the world, the Namib Desert. And this coastline is just so stunning because it's literally like ocean and there's no beach. It's just sand dunes. And, from the wind from the ocean, the sand dunes are so smooth and beautiful, and apparently it gets very foggy, like it does here in San Francisco, right at the coast because of the climate. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous area of desert. There's also another famous desert in Namibia, the Kalahari Desert. It's located partially in Namibia. The Kalahari Desert is actually home to 10% of the world's succulents, which, succulents are just really cute plants. I just wanted to throw out that fact for you guys. I think it's interesting. But Namibia is not all desert. It's actually pretty lush in some areas, and it does have lots of really interesting, important rivers. The Orange River is right here. It actually flows out from the ocean and up this way. It doesn't flow into the ocean. It creates the border between Namibia and South Africa, and flowing out from it is the Fish River, which is the longest river in Namibia. Also bordering is the Kunene River, which is right here. This river here's the Okavango River. And over here in the Cabrizi Strip, which we'll talk about why it exists in its history. It exists because it borders these rivers right here. Most importantly, the Zambezi River, like this strip, purposefully reaches out to access the Zambezi River because it flows out to the Indian Ocean on the other side of Africa. And also the Chobe River forms this half of the Cabrizi Strip right there, meeting up with the Zambezi. There's also, moving away from rivers, we have the Etosha Salt Pan, which when it's the rainy season, this area becomes a big salt lake, but when it's not, it completely dries up and becomes a salt flat. And this region is actually a national park, the Etosha National Park. It's a big wildlife preserve. It's where you'll find the elephants roaming around. I actually checked out a book to read to you guys about this national park, but it was mostly about like the scientists working in it than about the actual park or Namibia or anything, so I scrapped that video. Kind of a bummer. It had lots of elephants in it. That's why I got it. But Namibia is also pretty mountainous as well. You can see the mountain ranges right here. It basically goes like ocean, desert, mountains. So the area where the mountains start is called the escarpment. Sorry, my accent. The escarpment. escarpment. And it's very mountainous. The biggest mountains are right around here in the Brandberg region. What's the tallest peak right there? And there's also the Huns Mountains down here. Sorry, my cat's snoring in the background as usual. But once we get past the mountains, we reach this region called the Great Plateau, which is where the majority of people live. Namibia is actually how do I say this? It's like the second most sparsely populated country after Mongolia, which doesn't mean it has the lowest population. It means it has the lowest population based on the size of the country. So, there are lots of people that live in Namibia, but they're very spread out across the country. But most of the people live in the plateau area. And then we have this region over here, which is called the Bushveld, which is like the savanna. It's like a savanna type of land, but it's actually very, very rainy. It gets the most amount of rain in Namibia, thanks to rain coming from this direction, raining on it, because most water coming from this way turns into fog. Precipitation lands in the mountains, and not much happens out there in terms of rain. And then let's go for the cities in Namibia. This is the capital city of Windhoek. Hope I'm saying that right. I've been practicing. We also have Rehoboth, I believe, which is really interesting in that when it was established, it wound up becoming its own, like, independently ran territory, like hoping to become a country, but that didn't pan out. I think that's really interesting. Luderitz down here is very important in its history. We'll get to why it was, but in this region over here, we have the diamond mining region where diamonds were discovered, basically just like coming out of the ground, and diamonds are mined in the ground and offshore as well. If you know De Beers diamonds, this is where they get all their diamonds. And Namibia government and the mining industry really focuses on the fact that there's no like blood diamonds or child labor or any of the horror stories. When you think about African diamonds, they're very ethically mined here in Namibia, so you don't have to worry. And then finally, which is going to lead into its history, in this region right here, we have the meteorite field. So we're starting off our history in the year 600 million BCE, when the largest meteorite shower in the history of the planet landed right about here. Massive meteorites. There's one famous one that's so big it's never been moved because it's just so big. It's pronounced the Gibeon meteorite field. But the meteorites here are really valuable, apparently. You can like find them online. They're in museums all over the world. Just like you can find tons and tons of meteorites in this area, apparently. So that's where Namibia's history sort of begins. The first human history begins around the year 20,000 BCE. In about this area over here up in the Huns Mountains is where we found evidence of human pottery and tools. They learned how to make fire, and they also made some really beautiful cave art and rock art, which I'll show you a picture of in this book. Really interesting. My cat is snoring away in the background. I'm sorry if you hear that. The first tribal people we know of to live in Namibia were the San people, who were, actually you can see them right here. They were a hunter-gatherer tribe, and they developed their own form of archery. And they remained, in that hunter-gatherer stage. They didn't enter like the Stone Age, Iron Age, anything like that, until I'd say like the 1500s, 1600s CE. So they remained, very, old school hunter-gatherer style living for, tens of thousands of years, honestly. Also, the early peoples in this time include the Damara people and the Nama people. In the 14th century CE, flashing forward again, the Bantu expansion happened. The Bantu people started entering the region. It was a little iffy between the interaction of the tribes, but it's important in that the Bantu expansion was the source of the ancestry of some of the biggest tribes in Namibia, especially up here in the north. This is where we get the Herero tribe, the Ovambo tribe, and the Himba tribe. Quite a lot, but the Hereros are the ones I need you to remember for its history. So, the Portuguese were actually the first people to step into Namibia from Europe. Diego Sau landed in Cape Cross in 1485, which was right around here. It's called Cape Cross because he set up a big cross there to just kind of mark where he was. Later on, Bartholomew Diaz would land in what is now Luderitz and set up a little Portuguese town there. Not called Luderitz, it would be called Luderitz much later. The next important event would be the Orlams coming over. So the Orlams were a people who came from South Africa. Once the Dutch arrived in this region, they were very persecuted and whatnot, so they escaped, crossed over the Orange River. They brought with them the technology that they learned from the Europeans. So basically they came with guns and they started threatening the Nama tribe and other tribes in this area in order to survive, honestly. But it did spark a war with the Nama in 1880. And it only ended because the Germans stepped in and interfered. So I'm ahead of myself. The Germans arrived in the form of missionaries, so did the British, and actually there were Finnish missionaries in what is now Namibia as well, here to convert people to Christianity. The Germans were greatly interested in the area, mostly because this was the scramble for Africa period, where lots of European nations wanted pieces of Africa, and Germany was interested in this. But so were the British, so they kind of went back and forth. The British actually captured what is now Walvis Bay and claimed it for them. But the Germans were the ones who went out in Namibia. It was actually Otto von Bismarck who declared the colony of German Southwest Africa in 1884. It didn't include Walvis Bay. That still belonged to the British. But they negotiated this land with the British. The British allowed them to have the Caprizi Strip so that the Germans could have access to the Zambezi River, so that they could access their land on this side of Africa, even though it's right next to Victoria Falls, one of the largest waterfalls in the world. So actually I think it is the biggest waterfall in the world. It's either that or Niagara. It's very big, very beautiful actually, but yeah, it's not very navigable at all. It's a massive waterfall, so the Germans kind of got tricked there. But this was their colony of German Southwest Africa. And the Herero tribe and the Nama tribes really resisted the Germans. They really started fighting back in the very early 1900s. And the Germans answered back in the wrong way with declaring a genocide. They wiped out a vast majority of the Herero and Nama tribes. It's actually really devastating. They poisoned their water, they starved them out, they built concentration camps. It was horrifying what they did to these people. They very nearly succeeded in wiping them out. The Germans did apologize in 2004 for this happening, and it's considered the first genocide of the 20th century. Things changed pretty drastically in 1908 when the diamonds were discovered here. Luderitz is the name of the German guy who bought the town from the Portuguese, named it after himself. So the diamond mining industry began over here and started to generate a lot of profit for the territory. But World War I happened, right? So South Africa actually went in and occupied Namibia. South Africa had won its independence from Britain by then. So South Africa now owned Walvis Bay. So they stepped in and took over the rest to try to stop the Germans. And once the League of Nations was formed after World War I, they gave South Africa control of the, colony territory in a specific mandate in that South Africa would control the goings-on here for a few decades or until Namibia, or the colony, was stable enough to be self-governing and independent. So the name was changed to Southwest Africa, and South Africa had total control. Now, I gotta put this delicately because very famously, South Africa was controlled by a white minority who implemented a lot of segregation, and they certainly did so here in Southwest Africa. They basically did like a reservation style relocation of people out into like arid lands, which are still named and exist today. They built like little areas of the cities that were separate from like the white elites so that the black population could live there, where there was like no clean water, no hospitals, no schools, things like that. Very early apartheid. But after World War II, the League of Nations became the United Nations, right? And they told South Africa to surrender the land to them so that they could start establishing this as its own independent country. And South Africa straight up refused to do so. And started imposing like 100% pure apartheid restrictions on the people living here, letting the white minority have all the money, control, political power, and the black Africans having none and living segregated. So the UN reverted their mandate. They just negated it completely and said that no matter what, this is going to become an independent country, and we're going to name it Namibia after the Namib Desert. South Africa still greatly disagreed, held strict control over the area. So a rebel group called the Southwest African Peoples Organization was founded in the 1960s, otherwise known as SWAPO. They started a war, basically, their own conflict, their own guerrilla warfare against the South Africans so that they could achieve independence. And they had like their weapons supplied by and money supplied by the Soviet Union and Cuba. They were both invested in Namibia and Angola as well, which made South Africa and, of course, the United States very worried because, the fear is that it's going to wind up becoming a communist country. So the Western world, so to say, was in favor of South Africa because of the rebels getting assistance from the Soviets and the Cubans. But they came to an agreement. They agreed, a total ceasefire would happen. And they wound up getting their independence. The UN stepped in and supervised the transition to make sure, the South Africans didn't do anything, that SWAPO didn't do anything. SWAPO wound up becoming a legit political party. Once they had elections, it became the majority party. It still is today. And it Constitution was written in February 1990, and independence officially happened on March 21st, 1990. And honestly, from a political perspective, it's been very smooth in Namibia. The transition of power has been very smooth between presidents. Their first president, it says in their constitution they can only do 2 terms, but their first president had 3 because technically his first term was just given to him because he's the leader of SWAPO. So he technically, on a technicality, ran for 2 other terms. But other than that, it's been very smooth politically in Namibia. There's only been a couple of hiccups. When the Angolan Civil War broke out, many, many refugees crossed the border to live in Namibia. And it created a lot of unrest in the northern area, especially, here's the city of Rundu. It's just, when your territory suddenly has tens of thousands of refugees running into it, it creates issues, but it's been resolved since then. Also, the Caprivi Liberation Army formed in 1999 with the goal to have the Caprivi Strip become independent from Namibia, but that was unsuccessful. They did not manage to do that. They were stopped, especially since they were doing some terrorist tactics in order to try to get their way, and they got stopped very quickly. So it's still part of Namibia. And basically that's where Namibia is today. So I think it's a really interesting history. Sorry that was so quick, but whenever I get really excited about a history, I talk too fast, so I apologize. Let's look through the book, and maybe I'll read some to you so we can be together a little bit longer. Namibia. Here's a picture of the capital city, Windhoek. And here we have a nice little political map. So let me get pencil again. So here you can see I'm bring closer, the Etosha National Park right here. And here you can see some of the territories. You can see Ovambo Land, Damara Land right there. So those are examples. There's quite a lot of others. Actually, the ones up here were self-governing for a while, but those are examples of the territories that those people were sent out to live. You can see the Skeleton Coast Park right here. And this area, the Sperrgebiet, I believe. Not sure about that German, but it's called the Forbidden Zone because this is where the diamonds were mined. So no one was allowed to enter there. You couldn't drive through, you couldn't stop, you couldn't walk through it. It was all very strictly controlled. And there's the capital city, Windhoek, which usually capitals are, near a body of water or something, but the capital was established right here in the middle because once the Germans colonized it, it was the center hub of the roads and the railways, so it's just conveniently right smack dab in the middle. I also forgot to mention, I realized looking at this map, about Walvis Bay, because in the history I told you that it was occupied by South Africa, and when Namibia declared independence, they still didn't have Walvis Bay, which is an issue because it's the only natural harbor in Namibia, so it's a very useful area. And South Africa did not relinquish Walvis Bay for I want to say 3 years after Namibia declared independence, but it's now part of Namibia. Oh, so here's what I wanted to show you. This is the Skeleton Coast. Here we go. Isn't that gorgeous? What a scene. I love looking at pictures of this area. It is just so surreal to see the ocean here and then just desert right next to it. And it stretches for miles and miles and miles of this inhospitable desert filled with lots of shipwrecks. It's so gorgeous. Here's a natural map where you can see the regions, the Skeleton Coast, the Namib Desert, the Escarpment, Huns Mountains down here, Fish River, Central Plateau, the Bushveld. It's like geographically. This is the Orange River, which is the border of South Africa and Namibia, which is actually disputed. Some areas of it, lots of the little islands in between are disputed still between South Africa and Namibia. Some places along the river, the border is disputed. There's some rough diamonds mined in Namibia. And here's some very cute giraffes having a drink at Etosha National Park. And oh, let's read this. So this is really interesting. See the horses here? These are the wild horses of Aus. A small group of wild horses survives in the rugged countryside around the town of Aus in west central Namibia. The horses may be descended from those that arrived with German cavalry, which are horse-mounted soldiers, in the early 20th century. They also may be descended from animals that escaped from nearby ranches decades ago. The horses of Aus are the last desert-dwelling wild horses in the world. Very interesting. This is Windhoek, and this is Independence Avenue. It's the big main street. It's where the government, museums, all of the important areas of the town are off of this road. It says in 1928 it became the first road in Windhoek to be paved. Here's the rock art I was telling you about. Very amazing. I wonder if it says in here. No, I didn't read it in here. All the different pictures they drew, all kinds of animals, all kinds of people, all kinds of situations. There's so many different examples of the rocks. And I was about to mention this, but it says it right here. It says Namibia, it's home to traces to the planet's first artists. Oh, this is where it mentions it. In the Huns Mountains, hand-sized rocks found in a cave were decorated with figures of rhinoceroses, zebras, and other animals. The figures were carved into the stone, then painted in ochre, a yellowish pigment that comes from the mineral iron oxide, and charcoal. Scientists have dated the art to about 23,000 BCE. Then, the archaeologist Wolfgang Wendt found the rocks in July 1969. While working, he heard that humans had just walked on the moon for the first time. In honor of this, he named the site the Apollo 11 Grotto. And here's one of the meteorites. This one's in a museum in Hawaii. It says it was discovered in Namibia in 1836. Here's Adolf Luderitz, or the city of Luderitz he bought and named after himself. Here's a photograph of what it looks like, or what it looked like when it was founded. Now it's like a huge city. Let's see, it says this illustration shows the Herero revolt against the Germans at Windhoek. This is Hendrik, and I don't know how to pronounce this name. Hendrik Witbooi? I'm not sure, but he was one of the Nama leaders that fought back against the Germans. Here are some South African soldiers capturing German prisoners of war in 1915 when they occupied the country. This is the word I was looking for, townships. During the apartheid, the township was the area where they put the blacks to live. And here's some Namibians celebrating independence. This is, goodness, I've been trying to practice his name. Hifikepunye Pohamba, who was president when this book came out. I think he left office in 2015, not sure about that. Here is the Parliament building, Windhoek. Looks like a really gorgeous mansion. Some of the people, cute kids as always. Members of the Afamba working in a field. And let me read this too. This is about the Himba that I mentioned. The women of the Himba tribe take care of their skin with a lotion made of ochre butter and a resin made from omuzumba, a kind of desert shrub. The lotion makes their skin a deep red color. So it works like a sunscreen. They put it all over their exposed skin and in their hair. I think it's beautiful. especially in their hair. It's gorgeous. Let's see, some women pounding grain for their next meal, it says. Speaking in clicks, the Khoisan language, some of the tribes, not the Bantu descended tribes, but mainly the Nama. The Nama. Their language has a lot of clicks in it, so I've been practicing some words with clicks. I'm not going to embarrass myself right now. Definitely some other day when we do a language with clicks in it, I'll embarrass myself then. Here's the school and the University of Namibia. Oh, here's what I should mention. So, they have a very large HIV infection rate in Namibia. It's one of the main health crises in the country. It says in this book 21% of the adult population carries the HIV virus. Surely it's higher by now. I think this book came out in the early 2010s. But that's one of the main issues. That and malaria are very prominent in Namibia. Cultural life. Look how pretty this art is. That's nice. This is a Lutheran church because, of course, they were a German colony, so Lutheranism is the majority of the Christian denomination in Namibia. Here's a newspaper being printed, the Namibian. Let's see. Rugby's a big sport. So is soccer / football, cricket, other sports like that. Economy, all the hustle and bustle. Looks like one of the ports. You can see the ships. There are a few parks in Namibia that do trophy hunting, which is when an animal is selected and then the person goes out to track it down and hunt it specifically, so they're not just going through and killing all the animals. They're only out to hunt a specific one, which is a really debatable issue, because on one hand you're killing animals, and to me that's unforgivable. I could never. Let's get Topple back up to demonstrate that. On the other hand, it does provide a lot of money for the people in these regions, and there's some instances, I'm not sure Namibia, but throughout South Central Africa, where trophy hunting is the main source of income for some towns or even tribes. So it's a double-edged sword, honestly. If we try to save the animals, we could be hurting the people, or we could be hurting the animals and saving the people. There's no win there, so it's a tough issue. I don't know. They try to make ethical versions. I know in Kenya, I think they outlawed it. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if you know, but there is a park in Namibia that's just for trophy hunting. I don't know. I could never. Let's see, a uranium ore plant, because they don't just mine diamonds. There's also lots of other minerals that they mine. And it says Namibia is one of the top 10 uranium producing countries in the world. Their mining industry is probably their biggest industry, hands down. A fish factory in Walvis Bay. Let's see, it says this road, the 61, sorry, I read that wrong, the B1 highway runs from the Angolan border, curves south through Windhoek and continues to the border with South Africa. So it got straight through the country. And that, in a nutshell, is the history of Namibia. Their currency, the Namibian dollar. You can see right there. And let's read about the flag real quick. It's a really beautiful flag. It says, the flag of Namibia was officially adopted on March 21st, 1990, the date of Namibia's independence from South Africa. It is based on the design of the flag of the South West Africa People's Organization, that's SWAPO. It consists of 3 diagonal bands, blue in the upper left, red in the middle, set off with white narrow borders, and green in the bottom right. In the upper left is the sun with 12 rays. The red stands for the people of Namibia, the blue for the country's water and natural resources, green for agriculture, and white for peace. I like that. So, that is the history of Namibia. These baobabs. Tomorrow I'm going to read you a little storybook that's set in Namibia. It's really cute. And then we're going to move on to Europe. We're going to go back up north for a bit. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. You might even see Topple again sometime soon. Who knows? Thank you so much for watching. And I really hope you learned something today and that you found this video very relaxing. Maybe you're asleep right now, not even hearing me. Leave a comment if you're awake right now. Let me know what you think. It makes me really want to visit Namibia. I've read so much about it. It's so fascinating. What a beautiful country. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.